And we're going to be riding what's called the Henry Clay, which was the original train they used to pull the coal out of the mines and haul it off to the mountainside. Wow. That's all the workings of a real steam engine, and this is the boiler. This is sort of like what the boiler would have looked like down at the Newkirk Tunnel.
And here's our RJ taking up the rear.
Oh, I thought that was a name.
RJ taking up the rear again.
Yeah, there's the boiler. And there's one just like it right here out of service. There's my wife. You going in the caboose, hon?
Backwards.
All right, well, backwards.
That's the way. Oh, that's the wrong way. Backwards. Well, I guess I can sit up there.
All right.
Better to hold it. Trying to shake too much.
incorporated the borough, they chose the name Ashland to honor Senator Henry Clay from Kentucky. It might strike you a little bit odd why it's a small town in Pennsylvania honoring a Southerner like that. But if you look back at the history of our country in the 1850s, 2017, Senator Clay had passed a lot of tariffs that were very protective of the American coal industry. His efforts in the Senate really helped this area to grow, and you'll find a lot of references to Clay throughout the coal region. Like I said, Ashland is a typical coal region community. Back when there was a great demand for anthracite coal, our town had a population of over 7,000 people. But as the demand for anthracite declined, so did the population of Ashland. Right now we have a little over 2,800 living in town. Now if you look directly behind me across Ashland to that mountain you see in the distance, just over the next ridge, about 2 miles north of us, lying in the next valley, is the town of Centralia. Centralia is famous for having a mine fire burning beneath it for 58 years now. Years ago we used to talk about that mine fire when we stopped there, but that area has gotten so overgrown it's really hard to reference anything in Centralia. It makes it kind of difficult for us to get across to you what's going on over there. I will tell you that the mine fire started in an abandoned open stripping pit at the southern end of Centralia. Out at the end of our line we have a similar stripping pit. I'll tell you about the importance of that pit to our operation here, as well as how the Centralia mine fire started and still impacts the area today. We have other points of interest for you out there as well, and we're going to get everyone off the cars out at the end. All right, Dot.
Did you get all that?
Hang on.
Now, from what I've been told, that's been closed down for at least 10 to 12 years now. And the guys that are fixing up have seen ghosts walking around in there. Maybe one day we'll get a video of that inside. Over that way, you see the coal banks. And down there, the eastern section of Ashland. And right there where that little white tank is, you can see that right over there. Right down in there is Gould's Pump.
Alright folks, put some things out for you here at the end of the line. Looking over the railing structure right here below us, that's a replica of an old Bootleg coal mine. Bootlegs came into being in 1929 in the Great Depression. Most of the miners in the area were out of work, and at that time there were no government programs like unemployment or welfare to assist them. In order to survive, the men would come up on a mountain and start an operation like the one we have here. What we have on display is a three-man bootleg. One man will be lowered in that bucket down beneath the ground to mine the coal, and two men would wait on top. When the miner in the hole has the bucket full, he'd signal the men on top, they get on the windlass, crank the bucket to the surface, dump the coal out, send an empty bucket back down for the miner in the hole to refill. While the miner in the hole is refilling the bucket, the men on top would crack the coal and bag it. At the end of their workday, they'd take it downtown hoping to sell it for $2 or $3 a ton. but they couldn't sell or use for heating and cooking in their own homes. They called it bootlegging because what the men were doing in the mountains of the county was illegal. They're actually stealing the coal that belonged to the coal companies that own the land. Naturally, the coal companies were upset about that. So the coal companies would send the coal and iron police, their own police force, out to scour the mountains of the county looking for these operations. When the coal and iron cops found a bootleg mine, they get the miner up out of the ground, they throw dynamite down to blast the hole shut. And the men were then taken downtown where they went before the JP, and they were fined for stealing the coal. Because it was the Depression, the guys never had money to pay their fines, so they were then taken to our county jail in Pottsville. There are so many of these operations going on at that time in our history that our jail got really overcrowded, and the warden would have no choice but to release the miners the next morning after they had served just one night in jail. The guys would come home, reload their supplies, get back up in the mountain, and start all over again. It got pretty nasty in the area between the miners and the coal and iron cops. There were a lot of acts of violence, there were a lot of acts of vandalism. Some miners even went to the extreme of dynamiting the policemen's cars. The county government became concerned about this, so they hosted a series of meetings to try and resolve this. They decided at these meetings that if the miners would pay a royalty or a small amount of money for every ton of coal they get out of a bootleg to the landowners would be satisfied. That was also a satisfactory arrangement for the miners, and that's how the Independent Miners Association started in Pennsylvania. But even though they legalized bootlegging, it was still very dangerous work, especially for the man working underground. When he was down there working, the only light that he had to work with was a small open flame lamp on his helmet called the carbide lamp. It threw an open flame about 2 or 3 inches in length. Besides the constant fear of cave-ins, the miners had to worry about 2 very deadly gases. The first miners called black damp, which is heavy air or air without oxygen. If the miner walked into black damp, the lamp on his helmet went out, and that gave him the warning to get out of there and get out of there quickly before he was overcome. The second gas that he had to worry about was methane. If he hit a pocket of methane with the open flame lamp on his helmet, it was one big explosion. A lot of men were maimed or lost their lives in operations like that. Bootlegging and what you saw in the Pioneer Tunnel, what's known as deep mining. Behind you, there's an entirely different type of mining operation. That's what's known as open pit or pit mining. To give you an idea how much coal is out there at one time, if you look up to the left of the photo, you see a wall of rock. That's the bottom rock. From that point, 60 feet to the right, as far as the eye could see, and all the way down there at one time was all coal. We're standing still in the heart of the Anthracite region. That pit started in 1910 and dug in 1921. When they started, they went on top of the mountain that used to be there, drilled a series of holes, loaded the holes with dynamite, and blasted all the rock and other material with open coal loose. That's called the overburden. They pushed the overburden off to the side, exposed the mammoth, and once the steam was exposed, they pulled coal cars up there, and those cars were loaded by old-time steam shovels that ran on rails in that pit. When those cars were full, they were rolled to the end of our line. At one time, there was another rail line connected to the rail line that's still here today. The second rail line started at the bottom rock, ran down through this area where we're standing, and then it continued on down the mountain behind me. That's what's known as the plain. At the top of the plain, there was a steam-driven engine house, and at the bottom of the plain, way down in the valley in the town of Ashland, was our breaker. The breaker is a plant designed to clean, size, and prepare the coal. They attached several load of coal cars onto the cable, lower them down the mountain behind me by steam and rail power, dump the coal on the top of the breaker, process it, and then ship it out on the Reading Railroad. The coal from our mine was also prepared downtown. In the mine, the mules and coal loaded coal cars down. When they had about 15 or 20 cars sitting outside, they'd attach them onto a locomotive and back them out the same way that we rode here today. Switch those cars onto the plane and lower them down so the coal from the mine could be run through the breaker as well. When I talk about the breaker process, I don't want you thinking that it was something totally automated like most things are today. Back then it was about 10% automation, 90% manual labor. They'd lower the cars down the mountain behind me and dump the coal from the very top of the breaker building. The first thing that would happen is if you run through a series of rollers, big steel drums with spikes on them that would crack the coal down to the size they needed for the orders. Once the raw product cleared the rollers, it was funneled into a series of chutes that ran down through the length of the breaker building. Perched along those chutes at various intervals were 10 to 12-year-old boys called breaker boys. It was their job to separate the rock, the dirt, and the coal. What the boys would do, they'd block the flow of coal in the chute with their feet, reach in there, pick out the rock and other debris, throw it off to the side into the waste box. Once they thought they had it clean enough, they'd lift their feet, let the coal slide down to the next boy in line. He'd do the same thing. Theory being, by the time it got to the very bottom of the breaker, there'd be nothing but raw coal coming out of the chutes and into the coal cars. Like I said, back then that was a job for a 10 to 12-year-old boy locally. Then they worked a 10-hour workday 6 days a week, and for that the boys were paid 90 cents a day. All right, back to our mine's history. The Pioneer closed in 1931 at the height of the Depression. The company ran out of money and they left all their equipment inside the mine and blasted the entrance to the mine shut. They intended to reopen, but they never did. When they decided to open this for tours in the 60s, guys went in the mine, they found equipment in there, so they brought it out and rebuilt it. And those cars that you rode out in today were actual coal cars that worked this mine from 1931. Now the engine that pushed this here, it's 93 years old this year, the Henry Clay, which was built back in 1927 by the Vulcan Iron Works up in Wilkes-Barre. Went to work on a job similar to this in the Delano and Hazleton areas for 28 years. When that job was completed, the engine was abandoned. We've been running it for 58 years now. It's fueled by anthracite, the hard coal. Fully loaded with coal and water, that engine weighs 30 tons. It's actually working a coal operation and pull its own weight of 30 tons plus 80 tons of coal. And it's the only Vulcan narrow gauge still operating in the world under anthracite steam today. Now, a little backstory in the Pioneer, how we went from being a working mine to a touring mine. Back in the 1950s, when the big mine shut down around here, the local economy was in a really bad slump. We had a very high rate of unemployment. A lot of people were leaving Ashland trying to find jobs elsewhere. Common thinking in town at that time was that they needed to attract manufacturing jobs to replace the lost mining jobs. Excuse me. But we had some people in town thought tourism would help the economy as well. One of our local attorneys was on vacation in New York with his family while out there they toured a salt mine. On the way home, Mrs. Strauss told Harry she thought that it was a good tour, and that it would be great if there's a coal mine that people could tour in Ashland like they toured the salt mine in New York. Well, Attorney Strauss was intrigued with that idea. He decided to pitch it around town. Lots of people thought he was pretty crazy, but some people thought it was a good idea. Definitely something worth looking into. So they formed a board to do that. Paul Reidel was picked as their first board treasurer. The more they talked about it, the more they thought this could be something good for our town. So after much planning and discussion, it was decided it was something they wanted to go forward with. At one of the last planning sessions, though, one of the directors said, it's all good in theory. We have no money. How do you think we can do this? At that point, Mr. Reidler went around the table and assessed the board members anywhere between $100 and $500, whatever he felt the men could afford. That's where they got the money to reopen the Pioneer. With the money that the board put up, they leased the mine, started retimbering it, they were building buildings out there. Everything was progressing nicely, except all along one of the directors was insisting that we needed steam engines here as well as reopening the mine. Well, they looked around the area and they found 2 Vulcans in a junkyard in Hazleton, and sent up to see if they were available. The junkyard told the board he thought the engines were useless. He was actually planning on cutting them up with a torch for their scrap metal value. But he told the guys if they're really interested, he'd wait to see if they could come up with the money. He wanted $1,200 a piece for them. At that point, the board was out of money. The men refused to put any more of their own up, so they made an appeal to the community. The Kiwanis Club and the Rotary Club in Ashland each agreed to buy an engine for us. 27 that we're running today and 26 that we have in reserve. That's why we have the Kiwanis and Rotary emblems on the cab. Back then they paid scrap value of $1,200. Today each engine's valued at $250,000. Excellent return on the investment. Truly they're priceless. All right, folks, instead we talk about Centralia, as I mentioned before, it started in a similar stripping pit to what we have here. And similar is an important word because there's a couple things out there that don't accurately represent what a stripping pit was like back when the fire started. One of those things is all that vegetation that you see on the left side of the mountain. That's fairly new growth out there. At the top of the mountain, where you're going to the rains and the snow is spraying topsoil down, allowing for those trees and bushes to grow out there. Until about 10 years ago, that was just a rock wall with a pit. The other thing deceiving about our pit is its depth. This is a rare one in that it was actually reclaimed back in the 20s and 30s. When they set the mine cars down the mountain behind you, rather than bring them back empty, they loaded them with the junk from the brakeman and started filling the pit in. One time that pit was about 400 feet deep from what you're seeing today. So to understand what a stripping pit was like and what happened in Centralia, picture about an 800 to 1,000 foot deep hole in the ground with sheer rock walls leading right down to the bottom. Certainly that's something very dangerous to be around. We're in the coal region, naturally all the towns around here were surrounded by pits like that. Go back into the 40s and 50s, another problem we had in the Commonwealth was the garbage problem. When somebody came up with a bright idea, let's fill in all these stripping pits with garbage and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It's kind of hard to believe, but that was considered such a good idea back then. It was sanctioned by the Commonwealth, and that's how a lot of towns had their dumps locally. The only problem with that plan was that the stripping pits were filling quickly because there's no way to compact the garbage that they're putting into the ground. In order to get around that problem, once or twice a year they'd set the dumps on fire with the intention of bringing the pile down, allowing for more garbage to go into the ground. That's exactly what Centralia Borough Council did back on Memorial Week of '62. They sent the fire company down to the dump. The firemen threw flares in, caught the garbage on fire. They let it burn for 2 days till it was down to a manageable amount, and then they put the garbage fire out. What nobody realized, though, was the garbage burning at the bottom of the pit touched an open seam of coal and ignited it. It took about 2 years till they noticed any effects from that fire. Then residents in some parts of Centralia complained about unusually high temperatures in their basements and gases coming up from beneath the ground. At that time, the state did some surveys over there. They sunk boreholes 300 feet into the ground, lowered thermometers down those holes. They found temperatures underground in some parts of Centralia were as high as 1,500 degrees. And then the mine fire moved directly beneath the town. Now, in 58 years, they made 2 attempts to put the Centralia mine fire out. The first time they tried flooding it with water, but because of all the old mine workings on the mountain and through the valley, the water rushed by the mine fire and had no effect on it. The second time they tried pumping in fly ash under pressure in order to smother the fire. That fire is burning so intensely it just jumped that barrier and continues to burn today. There's only one sure way to put a mine fire like that out, and that's to dig down, bring that burning material up, put it off to the side and water it down. Doing that will put the fire out, but doing that means moving the whole town of Centralia. So the federal government allocated $42 million to that project. They assessed each property in Centralia, made each homeowner a more than fair market value offer for their homes, and they also gave the residents relocation fees of $15,000. Over 400 families have accepted the offer and moved out of Centralia, but there's still 6 people living there today. However, as of right now, they have no plans to put the Centralia mine fire out. And out of fairness to the 6 people that remain, they're not the reason they're not putting the fire out. The reason is money. They estimate taking that fire out is going to cost $660 million. They don't have that funding in place, so as long as the government's not doing anything about the fire, they've decided to allow those people to remain in their homes. Now, does anybody have any questions?
Who owns Centralia? The federal government?
That's kind of a difficult question to answer. The people that are over there are living under eminent domain. So I guess technically the feds own their homes. Different parts of the town. I had relatives over there, and when they passed away, the government bought the property, but my uncle had a vacant lot, and my cousins still own that, but they're not allowed to do anything with it. The government bought the 2 sections of the land that my uncle owned that had buildings on it.
Well, what about the mineral rights underground? Who owns that?
The borough itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I promise you I can do a bonus on that. Remember what it's called? Bootleg. All right, what kind of mine are we working with? Bootlegger. Little known pioneer tunnel fact: we have a dead bootlegger in our bootleg hall. When they opened here, besides the tourism money and the boost for the local economy, one of the aims of opening here was to get unemployed miners back to work. The original staff, except for the first engineer, they were all certified miners and mine foremen. One of the gentlemen they hired was a guy from town named Eddie Crosby. Eddie was hired in '62, and his job from '62 to '65, he mined the coal for the train until it became illegal. But he stayed on as a handyman and a conductor. He was an interesting gentleman. He was with us through the '90s. And in our brochures, you can picture Eddie sitting down there cracking coal. If you have one of our brochures, you'll see it. But
I'll definitely grab one now.
well, moving forward, Eddie stayed on. Once he retired sometime in the '90s, and he lived right over the hill from us. And he had never married, he didn't have family, so he was there quite often. I guess in around 2005, Eddie passed away, and we all went to his memorial service. He was cremated, and his last wishes were that he wanted his ashes buried half in the bootleg where he mined, his picture was taken, and half in the 7-foot where he mined the coal. So we actually have half of the dead bootlegger in our bootleg mine.
Oh my goodness.
Cool.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
Eddie was an interesting man. He really was.
Can that, like, I don't know if that's called slag or what that is, like, the foam.
Comb. C-U-L-M.
C-U-L-M.
Yeah, comb.
Can the foam be burned?
Yes.
For heat?
Yes, years ago it couldn't be, but now a lot of the mining is actually reclaiming comb. Unfortunately, you can't see it. They have what they call cogeneration plants, and they'll take the comb, the leftover stuff, and they'll kind of pump it in, and you get like a vapor fire out. There's 2 cogeneration plants over in the Mahomet Mountain over there. There's Locust Mountain. They're heating, and it's not even 50, it's a 2-state prison.
I think you can see the chimney of the one over there. Way in the distance is the chimney for the coal gen plant.
Yeah, I see it kind of through the trees there. You're talking.
Yep, right on a little mound.
Yeah.
Most burn what they call nut or stove coal, a little bit coal. So in a lot
It is
of
running.
these home banks like that, they're small coal. Years ago they couldn't burn it because it's too small for the grates. But as
Let's view the sky.
they advanced the grates and made technology.
Yeah, right over
A lot of that
there.
coal is usable, so people would.
It's the coal gen plant.
You're welcome.
I think you can see that coal gen plant way over there. The stack of it at
Yeah,
least.
the stack of it. I couldn't see it when I was over. It's a little hazy.
What's that building based on?
That is the defunct Ashland State Hospital, formerly St. Catherine's. It's for sale if you want to buy it.
And it's haunted too.
First couple of years they were open, they'd only treat men and boys injured in the mines. Then they opened to the general public. And the state ran it till about 1983, and they divested of all their hospital holdings. It went into a community board, and then it was sold to a gentleman who specialized in buying small hospitals like that. And from what I understand, one of his employees was doing a little embezzling or something, and it wound up in bankruptcy. At one time, they were converting it to a rehab center, but
That's not.
for some reason with licensing, that fell through. And
I heard they're getting a lot of break-ins and vandalism with it closed
they've
now.
had quite a few, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I know one of the guys that worked there that were refurbishing it or
Copper.
yeah, yep.
Wouldn't steal the copper, the wiring, and plumbing.
And they did say they've seen ghosts of some kind.
I've heard that. They won't allow any paranormal investigators in there. That would be interesting.
That would.
Supposedly the woman who was head of the maternity ward haunts the place.
That's what I heard, yep.
I don't know how.
I think her name was Mary or something. I don't know.
I'd be lying if I said.
Right. I've heard that story.
All right, folks, I'm going to take you. I'm going to give you some pictures to look at going back. I'm going to preface that with an apology. At the end of last season, I put my pictures away so I'd remember where they were for this year. Unfortunately, I didn't remember where they were, so I had to resurrect some old beat-up ones. It's the Centralia pictures before and after. You get an idea of what it looks like. It's some pictures from the 80s when the mine fire was actually at the surface, burning on what they call an outcropping. I don't have a set for each car, so I'll give you the alternate cars and you take a look at them, pass them back and forth, and I'll get them back out at the beginning. Thanks for coming, folks. You're a good group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great information.
I'm just walking over with a bunch of the other YouTubers. Got RJ at the Apocalypse. And this was more modern mining. You can see that's all column waste.
Similar to the one in Centralia that the fire began. Obviously, it was a lot deeper than this.
Overview of all about this area, coal mining here. We came down to this little spot where they did what they call surface mining or strip mining.
Yeah, we're having a good time up here. Checking out the view, looking over towards, over this way was the Ashland Hospital. Oops, sorry. Right there's the Ashland Hospital, way in there, and that'd be Fountain Springs. And then sneak on over this way, and that's the town of Shenandoah.
See way off in the distance there, giant windmills.
And that stack up there is one of the coal generation plants. It's not running right now. It's right in the middle of the screen. I know it's hard to focus with a long shot like this. And then the old windmills. They're not old, but that's the new source of power now. There's some more coming up here. All along the river. I forget what name of the mountain that is. I want to say it's the Mahoney Mountain, but I'm not certain. I'll have to look in. Better video of that. Now this is a replica of a bootleg mine. And they did say that the guy that, I'll show a picture of him, that they did have a guy that was active up here making this a mine tour. He was actually buried. They cremated him and scattered his ashes there. So it's kind of like a memorial to him. Exploring with the cold cracker up in Ashland. Having a great time. Meeting lots of new people. The wife is somewhere. It's a shaky ride. Sorry for the coverage. Beautiful scenery. Everybody follows JP video.
We could go down.
We're gonna get some pictures of the train up here.
and actually catch the train.
RJ's running up.
So making our way down there and hopefully get some pretty cool shots of the train. The only problem with this.
Friend here following us. Now what is this saying about the weather? I don't know if anyone knows. I think when they're round, it's going to be a heavy winter. You know, he's going to cross these tracks. I don't think that's a good idea.
No. That way.
Yeah, but
Go that way.
he wants to cross the tracks.
No, I don't want to die.
Well, you're
Go that
messing
way.
with him.
Here you go.
Bees! No. There we go. Hey! People putting... Okay, where I'm at now, there goes the steam train blowing off the pressure again. This was a head frame that was brought here from another mine. Oh, good, I'd say 10 miles away, Monterey City. This used to belong to the Springdale shaft. And they took it apart. Now, I was at this Springdale shaft before they dismantled it and put it here. But these are the winch hoists. Oh, I just hooked it up this hill here. That is a beautiful shot. I gotta hurry up because we're going. There's all the controls. It's not all together like it used to be. And the motor's dismantled. Yeah, neat. And this was the original framework. Now I don't think they have a shaft drilled for this. It's just a make up one. But that's the original man car there. And there's no handles on it. But yeah, there's a video on YouTube called about the Springdale shaft. And this was brought here and restored. And will be here for a long time now. Most of these places get scrapped. But yeah, very, very neat. Okay, that'll about do it for this trip up here at the Pioneer Coal Mine Tour, October 4th, 2020. This is the meetup for fall. And again, thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, comment. I had a great time up here, and I got to meet JP Video again. Not DD. I'm trying to think of all the names. It's hard to remember them. I wrote them down. So, okay, until we get to our next spot, I'll see you then.